This past season has been really difficult in terms of disease control, and one of the diseases that we saw maybe a little bit more than normal was a bacterial disease, not a fungus, but a bacterial disease called Goss's wilt.
Well, you know, when you go to the doctor and they say, sorry, it's just a virus, there's not much we can do, it's going to run its course. That's kind of how we feel as corn farmers with Goss's wilt. You know, it's a bacterial disease. Our fungicides that we would spray really don't have any activity because it's not a fungus. So if there's really nothing that you can treat post-emerge on Goss's wilt, you have to manage it with your seed decision. And that's why we're talking about it right now, as most farms across the country are either wrapping up harvest or making those seed decisions. You have to take a look at Goss's wilt tolerance in the corn hybrids you're picking for next year.
Okay, so here's what normally happens. You decide in the fall, hey, I had a problem with Goss's wilt. You talk to the seed dealer. Yep, you get the varieties all set, everything's great. And then at the last minute in the spring, the seed dealer says, oh, sorry, I can't get you that variety, but we've got one that's just as good. Let's plant that one on the farm instead. And you kind of forget about this. So the reason we're bringing it up today is if you've had a Goss's wilt problem, then you definitely want to tell your seed dealer, look, I can't have any switches. You have to get me this seed that's the best for Goss's wilt, because that is by far the best thing you can do. Now let's talk about when are you most likely to have Goss's wilt?
Well, one of the big things that you have to avoid is corn on corn. If you've had a bad Goss's wilt problem on your farm and you go right back with corn again, Goss's is going to survive in that crop residue, and now you've got much more likelihood of having a Goss's problem the second year. When we look at corn hybrids, many times you'll see companies say, you know, this one's better on continuous corn, this one's not good on continuous corn. If your seed company is telling you don't put this on continuous corn, chances are it's a horrible number for Goss's wilt tolerance, and you don't want anything to do with that on your farm. But here's what happens. You say, you know, I've got that one field that's corn on corn, so I don't have to worry about that on the rest of my farm. Then you don't want to clean out the boxes on your planter. You don't want to clean out that central fill hopper, and you say, oh, there's only a few units in there. Plant that around the outside of your corn on corn field, and tell me if you notice a difference. We sure did the same thing on our farm one time, and all of a sudden we had Goss's just horrible on those end rows because that hybrid just didn't have the tolerance. If you've got continuous corn in your rotation, you really need to watch all the corn that you're planting. I realize it's more fussy on those fields, but chances are better that you're going to have more Goss's in your area. So be real fussy about which hybrids you get if you have continuous corn.
All right, let's talk about how you can solve this problem in addition to picking the right variety. And by far and away, that's number one, okay? Don't get us wrong. But in addition to that, you could do tillage. Now, there are disadvantages to tillage, certainly, but burying more of that residue will lead to fewer problems the next year. Another important thing is making sure you have the right overall fertility program. Because let's face it, it's just like you or me. If we eat good all the time, we're much more tolerant to getting sick. I mean, we're not going to get sick as often. Same thing in your crop. You've got to feed that crop correctly. So if you do those couple of things, you know, that's going to be really important. Take care of your crop. Give it the best nutrients, the best weed control, the best insect and disease control with everything else, and you'll find Goss's is usually less of an issue.
You know, the other thing is just trying to avoid damaging your crop in any way. For Goss's to get into the plant, it gets in most often through a wound. Now, if you have some hail or something like that, or some wind damage, there's not a lot you can do about that. But as you're making passes through your field and you're driving through the field, it's amazing to me how much more Goss's you see right along those wheel tracks as you've kind of beat up some of those plants. So do what you can to try to minimize that. Whatever you can do to minimize damage on your leaves is very important.
Goss's wilt can be a terrible problem for you, so again, make sure you're picking the right varieties, do everything else possible to not damage your crop and have the healthiest crop possible so it can survive any Goss's that might show up in your area.
The other thing you may consider is pre-emerge weed control, especially if you have problem weeds like our Weed of the Week. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed later in the show.